I should perhaps, since I know you'll all be distracted by my accent, I know that from experience I'm a New Zealander, so you can now concentrate on what I'm going to say rather than where I come from. I've been at Penn State a bit over 3 years now, and last semester was my first teaching, and it was a brand new course from scratch. So part of the reason I was able to say, you know, let's start from what we can do now was because this course did not exist beforehand, and I had no track record, no experience, no preconceptions of teaching in America. I had taught a lot in Scotland. So we could start from scratch. And then I got to Cole through a chance conversation with Tara Carson of PR at the College of Science, and I was interested in how to advertise the course. And so we talked about social networking approaches with her and advertising and so forth, and she said, oh, you should go talk to Cole and see what you can do in actual teaching. And it had never crossed my mind before what was possible when you're starting like that. And I want to say at the outset, I'm going to show you the sort of technical side of what we did. But one of the other things that really surprised me was we had 2 meetings that Cole set up early on where he got other, I don't know what you call them, but other faculty from other disciplines into that meeting. And a whole bunch of stuff came out of those guys. It just spewed out, a lot of which ended up in this course, unrelated to the technical stuff. For example, I gave extra credit for students that sent me exam questions that I used. Really simple thing, designing an exam question for a course means you really have to understand the course. Hardly any students did it. The ones that did pretty well and got the extra credit, but there was there. So that sort of trick that I'd never heard of before came out of this meeting, which was supposed to be about e-learning techniques. Okay, the course itself is kind of odd in that the Dean of Science has a alumni advisory group. The alumni advisory group consists of some of the wealthiest people I've met, and they fly in from all over the world to Penn State twice a year to give the dean a piece of their mind. And one of their pieces of advice was, quite rightly I think, that the standard of discourse in American public life when it comes to science is extremely low. And if Penn State really is serious about training the leaders of the future, which clearly we are, then we ought to be actually reaching out to the non-scientists and making sure that they have enough science that they can operate in the world. And most of the problems in the 21st century are going to have a scientific element to them or a scientific solution. And clearly students can leave Penn State, sure they've done their Gen Ed science requirement, but that was a dumbed down science course on fungal genetics or, you know, astrophysics or something, which doesn't set them up well for thinking about stem cells. Now you could teach stem cells, but stem cells is not going to be the thing that's important when they are the leaders of the future. Stem cells is important now. My prediction in 20 years' time, stem cells is completely uncontroversial and generating some of the best medical advances of this century. Stem cells didn't exist when I was an undergraduate. They weren't something we talked about. I never heard of them. So in order to prepare students for the world, you need to be able to prepare them about science and its general principles, its general methods. And so this course was set up intentionally as what we called a science appreciation course, like a wine appreciation course or a dance appreciation course. There's good wine and good music and bad music, and you want to learn to understand what's the difference, how to recognize it, how to use and enjoy good wine, good science, and good dance, well, pretty much everything. So this is a science appreciation course, and it was set up for non-majors. So if they are enrolled in science, they cannot do this course. And so what I ended up with, so we did have advertising problems and a brand new course. We ended up with 70 students who, most of whom were first year students, so freshmen, so it was their first semester, and they are currently enrolled in things like English, turf, grass, journalism, business, philosophy, a whole range of different things that I didn't really know existed at all. And they also hate science. Okay, they really hated science. And I used Poll Everywhere extensively, and we could talk about this a bit more if you like. One of the ones I used as an icebreaker was this question about why aren't you a science major? Which to me is one of those questions that I would like to know for every student. You know, why aren't you a science major? And this is what I suggested to them as the sort of reasons, and you can see that they either hate it or they thought it was too hard. This return rate of 30 was actually, I hadn't noticed until today, this was on day 1, and this was lower than I got. So I typically ran a response rate in the Poll Everywheres of about 45, with roughly 70 students in the class and perhaps 50 or 55 there on any one day. But you can see they hate it, right? There's really only less than a quarter of them that you know, you sort of feel positive about. So this was an audience that was extremely resistant to what I was going to say, and they're only doing it for their Gen Ed requirement. Okay, so I don't have a captive audience here. So we had a lot of discussion about how to handle this, and one of the things that I'd never heard about before was to teaching with the blogs. And I want to talk about the blog a bit because to me that was one of the completely stunning successes of the whole course. So I have ambitions to teach them what is good science and bad science and science and non-science, and a lot of that's tied up with the issue of what's good data and what's an anecdote, what's a fantasy and all that. So trying to recognize those distinctions, which as a scientist are kind of second nature, and I can assure you to these students that's not obvious. So they honestly think what their mother says is as meaningful as a double-blind placebo trial involving thousands of people. Honestly, if their mother said vaccines were dangerous, they'll believe it. And that's what they come to university like. So that's one aspect of things that I was teaching a lot in the class, and I did things like vaccine safety, is your mate toxic, why do we think smoking's bad for you, a whole lot of the stuff that in the class. But the other side of things I wanted to get across, one of the main course aims, was that science is relevant to them. So these are guys who sailed through school and hated it, and they also do their best to put it out of their minds. Whereas I assert that that is not something that you can do as a functioning human being, especially not a leader of the future. So what I needed to do was find a way of teaching them that science was relevant to their daily lives, where each of them is from very different backgrounds and disciplines and preconceptions and so forth. So, for example, half of them would love to have done stuff on evolution, and the other half was sick to death of evolution creation debates, and they did not want to go near that topic. Okay, so we set this blog up with the aspiration that they would blog on it, and this was a suggestion from Chris Long in philosophy, and I guess most of you know Chris, who's been using it very successfully in his small philosophy class. In my case, what I did was to suggest to them that they blog on anything, and I would be the judge of whether it was sufficiently scientific. I'll come back to the shirts in a minute, but I just want to show you an example of what happened. So this is the September blog period, and so what I required was that the students would post an entry roughly once a week and roughly 2 or 3 comments a week during different periods of the course. And this is September, and just to give you a sense of it. So here's, the students are often following what's in the news, so this is when there was something from the Phoenix mission, and then this was when Richard Branson's rocket got up into space. This was a triumph. I managed to get a Nobel Prize winner to come talk at the course, and I don't know if you guys know Barry Marshall, who's an Australian who discovered that stomach ulcers are caused by bacteria, not by stress. Barry is one of the most fantastic speakers for undergraduates. He brought his Nobel Prize in, they all got to touch it, and it was just fantastic. And this particular post is a reaction to his session where this program, TV program, which I don't know, but you guys probably do, there was a bit of disconnect on the TV stuff because I didn't follow Glee, for example. I'd never heard of it before. And these guys were just fascinated by Glee. This is from, is it Castle? Anyway, this person who was one of my better bloggers, she has posted on personal reaction to this. She's seen this. They're talking about stress causing ulcers. She knows because she's heard from the Nobel Prize winner that's not true. And she's asking, why do people still think that when all the doctors, all the medical advice, everything has changed the view of medical science, which Barry had dealt with. And then she's explored that, saying, well, here's some evidence, here's some other things, and she's gone off in other directions. And then 4 people have posted their reactions to that, which is different links to going in other directions, their personal reactions and so forth. I won't go through that. I just want to show you that there's 5 students now talking about Barry Marshall and how it matters to their lives and to a TV program. And I didn't have to do one jot of work to get that going. So it took care of itself. So I didn't have to even think about all of this stuff. This is another one that amazed me. I was talking about random processes and how we know when something's by chance in science. This is a guy who's blogged on Mr. Poisson. So he actually, somebody who hated mathematics, has actually got into finding something out about Poisson. And you can see a whole lot of different things going on here. And so what was in the news, what they saw on television, all of that, what they're doing in their majors, that's what they posted on. And there was almost nothing that didn't have a scientific element. So this is before we discussed vaccines. This guy wants to know about them. There's a lot of excitement because new planets had been discovered during that time. You know, there's some wacky stuff. There's some really good stuff. So Carolyn was one of my stars. She blogged on a humongous range of things. This is a typical where she's been reading around, she's raised this issue, she's got links to other things going on. So she has looked into a topic she would never have looked into before, posted on it, and it's attracted 3 comments from other students. So I didn't have to do any of this.
I mean, it was amazing to me, the stuff of science, the fact that it interacts with their daily lives, that they taught themselves that. And some of it was really excellent. I mean, some of it was really first class. So life on Mars, what is life? And I've added this to prompt the comment on what would it mean if we found life somewhere else, and so forth. But I didn't do very much of that. I didn't add very much. I corrected things that I knew to be wrong, and I tried to keep an eye on it. I had to slap a couple of students down on cannabis discussions, mostly because I thought they were posting stuff that was going to be harmful if they went into the law. And some of them retracted that and some of them didn't. Some of them posted some stuff that was quite on the edge about sexual behaviour and contraception and so forth, but I thought on the right side of it, so we kept that. I talked about how scientists are never represented properly in movies, and here's some discussion about that. This one ran the whole semester, is a virus causing obesity? You sort of see a theme here. This is all stuff that the students themselves react to. Benjamin Rush had a role in the smoking debates. He was also one of the Constitution framers. Turned out there was a guy in class who was a descendant of his, and he posted several times on that. Benjamin Rush was also somebody who was responsible for bleeding patients, and was that line of thought was what killed George Washington. All of this came up without me knowing any of it. I mean, it was really fantastic. So the stuff of science was taught to each student by themselves, and they taught each other that it matters a lot in their lives. So it was just amazing. It went on and on. So that was very, very cool. From my point of view, a totally unexpected gain. I didn't have to worry about any of this stuff. I mean, a lot of it's focused on what they care about themselves, you know, in terms of their rather interesting lives. But you know, so it was great. So that worked really, really well. The other thing that I used it for was to get them going in the first instance, just to make sure they could use the technology and post and so forth. I got them to do post their first blog, being on why they weren't a science major. And I thought I'd just show you the best one of those responses, because it gives you a sense of why we need this course. I was kind of horrified by having 70 responses which were various forms of "I found science boring, dull or hard." And that was pretty alarming to me. This one was the only actual post I gave extra credit for, and this guy was actually a final year student. I lost interest in science as a school subject relatively early in my academic career. To be clear, I truly appreciate modern conveniences and fully acknowledge science contributions. This, however, was not the science represented in the classroom, where teachers preached about an infallible and omnipotent force from boring and, in my case, antiquated texts. The course curriculum demanded blind faith and punished healthy skepticism, rewarding those who could recite passages from the text with near religious zeal. So I dropped out of the congregation and gravitated towards areas with livelier debate, literature, politics and philosophy. I mean, frankly, I just find it staggering that students can emerge from the education system with a view that science is like that. I mean, anyway, I spent most of the semester reversing that sort of a view. So all we dealt with was things that scientists don't know, don't understand what it's actually like at the coalface. So I got, through the blog, 70 students writing these sorts of essays about why they didn't like science, and that sort of feedback I found extremely useful. The other thing I did, Cole assigned, I don't know if that's the right word, Chris Stubbs to help me with this, and actually getting it off the ground took a huge amount of effort on Chris's part to get over my computer phobias and all the technical stuff, and my belief that we couldn't get 70 students enrolled and functioning and all that, and it turns out to be quite straightforward if you've got Chris with you. Chris also suggested let's have an instructor blog, and so this is my blog which runs alongside this one, where I posted stuff that either reactions to the class or questions or feedback for the students. And of course, there we go. And so this is my thoughts on how the class was going. And so anybody who's interested in, for example, the final grades, the breakdowns, I put it all up here, my reactions to it. I had quite a few problems with them thinking my tests were too hard. And so a lot of that was managed on this through my blog, talking to them, and they could respond if they wanted to. Some of this is thinking about the actual process of the teaching. So there were 10 of my 70 students who, when you looked at the grade book, their marks were harmed by not blogging enough. And so there are a couple of interpretations of that. One is that they're just lazy, and another one is that there's something wrong with blogging. And if I'd done it as essays,
those 10 students would have put in essays, because everybody can read their work. So a lot of students love that, but there are of course students who are going to be a little worried, and you worry about people who've got English as a second language, for instance, or can't string a sentence together, that they might be embarrassed about posting stuff. Anyway, I emailed the 10 of these students, and only 2 of them got back to me, which confirms that the other 8 were lazy. And one of them said, no, I'm just lazy. And the other ones did express some nervousness about having to post blogs, and he would have found it easier if I'd given him an essay. So, that's 1 in 70, which is, to me, pretty acceptable. But even that guy said, in the way he wrote the email, it was kind of like, well, maybe I could have put my finger out and done a little bit more work and yada yada. So I think this is actually a very good way of going. I just wanted to mention a couple of the technical issues. Oh, I should say too that the class feedback on this was really good. Some of the students said to me that, especially the ones who were going on in journalism, at the start of the year they were very excited by this. By the end of it they realised they hadn't done enough, and that's because they were kind of intimidated by posting something that had to be of a high professional standard, because it's always going to be out there. On the other hand, some of the students that just got going, they were pretty bad to start with, and they got so good by the end of the semester. A couple of the problems: the search engine is completely lousy, and that is actually detrimental to the education. So, for example, we have several posts on whether ice helps injuries, which I was rather surprised to discover there's no good evidence for that. If you ice pack injuries, it takes the pain away. There's no evidence that it makes it heal faster. Okay, that's the sort of thing that a student looking for that post on ice would have seen. Actually, you can, if you fiddle around for a while, get over that error. I don't know how I do it, but I just fiddle around. When I do that, I still can't pull up the ice entries. So that is a woefully poor part of the software which needs fixing. And the other side of it was that I did try to keep the tag cloud curated and stuff, but it's very, very hard when posts are coming in, and especially in the run-up to a marking point. The posts come in very fast. It's hard to keep on top of it. So that, I think, is really a question of staffing the course better. But you can see by the end of the course, the tag cloud had blown out, really. The way I'm going to handle that next year is I've appointed 2 of the best bloggers from this year to be TAs on the course for next year. I had several others actually apply for that as well. And they are going to curate the site, interact with the students a bit more in the discussions, post a few blogs of their own, and generally help and encourage the students a bit more than I had time for. And the Dean of Science was so pleased with this that he was more than happy to pay for those 2 undergraduates. And I've already talked to them, and they had a bunch of ideas about the site and how we could organise it. So that was very important. The marking was, there's no question the marking was a pain in the butt. Chris organised this contributions page so that I can organise things by what's going on. This is the comments, so if you want to follow who's just said what on something, this page tells you what was going on, because through the site there's no other way of seeing what happened in the last 24 hours. But you can also sort by student, and so this is how I did the marking. So let me pick a decent student. This guy, these are the 3 marking periods I had. You can see everything he's done in terms of the entries, so it's click, click, click for me to see what his work was. And I used Chris Long's marking rubric, and it was actually pretty quick to do the marking, and the slow part is giving the students feedback, which I think is probably always true for essays and so forth.
Did you do this all yourself?
I did all the marking myself because I was trying to see where the issues were and so forth. I'm going to talk to the Dean about whether this coming year I can use those TAs. There might be issues with using undergraduates to mark other undergraduates' work, so I'm a bit nervous about that. It just gives you a sense of it though. By the time I'd got into the groove, it takes me about 8 hours to mark one of these marking periods.
A whole marking period?
Yeah, so that was 5 weeks worth of blogging. Took me about 8 hours to mark, and it was a hell of a lot more pleasant than marking essays. It's a much, much more pleasant than marking essays. I can't begin to, I mean, you know how bad marking essays is. So I'm starting from a low point here, right? This is a lot better, more fun, more interesting.
I'm not familiar with Chris's rubric. Were you having to read every single
More or less, that's why I've got the
and give feedback on every single post?
Yeah, so not every single post, no. So what I did was to do the blog period. So I divided the semester up into 3 periods, and I took the best mark from those 3 periods, the single best mark from those 3 periods. And I did it that way because my previous life in Edinburgh used to be ruined by students whose, well, there's an endless succession of dying parents and grandparents that run through these.
And so you don't want to get into any of that. What you do is you allow that they can drop a third of the semester without any loss. So in my case, I was also a bit nervous about how the blogging was going to go. So I did it these 3 periods so that they could practice for the first one and then use period 2 or 3 as the real thing. And most of them did that. They used period 2 as the real thing and then did not enter anything in period 3. And the ones who then screwed up or got re-engaged or something, they did most of the work in period 3. Chris's rubric was really, is a really good place to start. Incidentally, as a new user to Angel, I thought the absolutely most fabulous part about Angel, where is my course gone? Why can't I find the, oh, there we go, sorry. So you just don't use it for a bit and then you go on. The fabulous part about Angel was the Angel support guys, 24/7 cover. It's just brilliant. When you're really stressed out about an exam that's not working right, there's somebody there holding your hand in the middle of the night. And Chris was not kind of that available for the website, but obviously it didn't matter quite so much. So this is his rubric. So I just tweaked this slightly. So if you just look at the left-hand column, I think there's a way of me making that. Nope. The left-hand column is saying things like how often they did it, what the entries were like, what the comments were like, what was in them, how well they did it, how well they went elsewhere with connections and so forth. And then you have across here the A, the B, the C, and the D. And so when I was marking this, so if they've done more than I'm asking for, then they're up here. And then so you just go through this thing circling where they are at and then sort of hold the thing back and look at where most of the circles are on the page, and you can arrive at a mark very quickly. And you don't actually have to read things too clearly because the students I found were so stretched out in their abilities that something like this, comments elaborate on it further with existing. You can see that in 2 seconds. We don't even have to take on board what the actual elaboration is. You say, has the student said anything other than my mother told me this? Has the student gone to any other site? Have they thought about this, or are they just trying to post a comment? So I found the actual side of it easy. Then to explain to a student why they got a B, you need to extract from this what's gone wrong. That's the slow part.
That's the feedback, you're not necessarily giving them feedback on the individual entry.
That's right. So I did it on the whole period. So that worked. So you can see that's why Chris has got it broken up. So you can see, each point, and you can see whether an individual student can see whether they've done enough this way. Alexandra, she was crazy, and look at this sort of entry. She went on. Couldn't stop her. And then here's somebody who, didn't do all that much to start with, and then decided that their second period was really good, and didn't bother at all with the third period. And I know Chris and I talked about that. I actually sort of feel relaxed. If these entries are good enough to get her an A here, that's fine with me. It also made my third marking period slightly more relaxed because there wasn't as much marking to do. So that worked pretty well, I thought. And the aspiration that science has to turn this course into a 400 student course, 400 individuals, and that sort of scale, so to compete with some of the really big ones. And if we get to there, I definitely can't do the marking myself. But it will scale up. I think everything else, the technology would scale fine.
So you use the rubric to assign a grade basically, and then how did you give the feedback?
Yeah, so I manually typed it into Angel, and I did talk to Chris about whether we could manage some slightly more technical approach to that. Basically, it was the same comments over and over again. So I could take from some sort of spreadsheet which had bullets. I could just say, these 5 apply to this student, and then whoop, off they go to Angel, and in they go. That'd be great.
There's a tool that there are a bunch of different iterations on campus. I know we use one in Earth and Mineral Sciences, the Rubricator, and if you enter your rubric that you have in your syllabus, and you can put feedback behind each of those items, and you go through and use it for each student.
Oh, that sounds fantastic.
Check. And at the end, it will produce for you the PAT answer, which you can then customize if you want, but it would give you that boilerplate. Yeah, that'd be great, because I think what you need is the boilerplate, and then you make another comment if they've been good to say, I really love that one on cats. Yeah, you can add,
just to show you've actually read the thing.
So I don't know how
but that would,
you guys can...
Yeah, that would be really good. I think if that was the case, it would bring the marking down probably half the amount of time taken.
Absolutely.
Which case, I'd say, 4 hours for marking. So it's probably 3 lots of 8 hours for the marking of the blog. So I thought this part of things were absolutely terrific, I have to say. And Chris and I are now having
various other discussions about things we might try in the future. I was a bit shocked, I have to say, that none of this would have happened apart from this chance discussion with Tara, who then says, you know, talk to Cole. So I didn't know any of this existed. Everybody in the College of Science knew I was doing this course because they put it out to consultation and then they put it out to bid as to who was going to do it. So it was very widely known, and not one person said to me, there's these guys that can help you with new imaginative ways of teaching. And I'm sure that for you guys this is old hat, but for us it was an eye-opener. And to give you a flavour of that, I'm now giving a seminar in the Department of Biochemistry and Molecular Biology in their research series on this course. So they were sufficiently shocked and amazed that I've never given a research talk on a class before. So it's going to be a bit of an eye-opener. Maybe nobody will come. But the head of department was sufficiently surprised by what was possible. He wants it discussed in his class. The reason that he knew I was doing it was because the dean asked me to come talk to the heads of department in College of Science. So the dean and all of the heads of department of these phenomenally successful, competitive, driven departments, they all sat round for this sort of time while I went through the blog. And the head of statistics, he's getting his son, who is a non-scientist, to do the course next year to fulfill his gen ed requirement. And several of the others have asked me about whether they could contribute into it. I should say I got some faculty to contribute things. So the dean himself, for example, gave two classes on the universe. You guys might know, it was news to me that we only understand 4% of the universe. 96% of the universe we have no idea about. It isn't stardust and we don't know what it is. In biology we learn more and more stuff through time. In astronomy they've gone the other way. So they're getting more and more ignorant through time, which I thought was fantastic. The Poll Everywhere stuff, you guys I guess have been thinking about this in light of the clicker disasters and stuff. This is fabulous. Honestly, the students loved it, I loved it. You can use it for prompting things, you can do it in class spontaneously, it's so easy to set up. You can break the ice with it. I mean, the students really were, you know, we had tortured discussions at the beginning. Would the students be able to cope? Would they have text-only plans? You know, all that sort of stuff. We had problems with the blog to start. We talked about should we do it anonymously or should we have it open? None of that matters. The students don't care, you know, it's just amazing.
Do you have any pushback from students? Because that's the pushback, that's the argument, right? Messaging plan.
Yeah, so Chris showed them how it worked, and we did the first one. That's just why the shirts came up. We did the first one. I wore a very dapper shirt, I might say. And this was the first one we did to make sure that they actually made it work. And they could make it work. So what have we got here? 27 of them, which is pretty poor return. But we got them using this, and we asked them during that session, how many students do not have a phone in the class now? And there wasn't a single one. And who's got a limited text number, limited text plan? None of them had. So it was a complete non-event. Maybe that's why I never got 100% return rate in the class. You know, there might be the odd student. But none of this is being assessed, so I don't think that matters at all. We also ran a comment wall, which, even though I didn't ask about it in the feedback, the comment wall got immense comments from the students afterwards. It's a sort of up here somewhere, isn't it? Down? Oh yeah, there we go. So when I got into the class to start with, although you don't get me started on the classroom, so I got to the point where I needed 2 computers to run in the classroom. I couldn't get a classroom with 2 computers. I couldn't get a classroom with 2 screens. They're really shocking, actually. So when I'm running lots of windows and I've got lots of stuff happening and internet things going on and it was a bit stressful to get going, once I got it going, I then put the comment wall up, and if I was organised, there would be 10 minutes before the class where the students could post comments. And you can see some of this stuff looks like gibberish, but some of it is because they are actually asking questions that they don't want to put their hand up about. And so I found it extraordinarily useful. I would use my laptop on the side and watch the comments come in, and then when I had some guest speakers speaking, I would sit with my laptop and watch the comments come in, and the students would say to me, he's going way too fast, or I don't understand that biochemistry. And so I would stop the person and say, somebody's just texted in to ask, what did you mean by the citric acid cycle, or whatever. And so for me it was really, really useful. Also, when I had this communication problem with the students about the, well, not philosophical difference with the students about what testing is about,
It was quite ugly in the middle of semester because I really was pretty determined not to dumb my course down, and they were pretty upset they weren't getting A's. A lot of the pressure was blown out through the comment wall, and I could dig out the comments where people are saying things like, you know, I got a D in this course, there must be something wrong with your class. And they're not going to say that face to face, but I got the sense of what was out there, and I found it really useful. This is, get Penn State a poll everywhere plan that everybody can use this. It's just great. So I do think that if you, once this logic goes, then the two-screen thing is really important. I couldn't even get the wireless, the wireless signal was not strong enough at the podium for my portable to work, so I actually had to park it on a table 2 or 3 meters away, and I have to walk over and have a look at it. You know, it's, anyway.
That's it for easy, he's done.
Two questions. One, can we get a copy of your syllabus?
Sure. The syllabus actually doesn't say too much other than all the technical stuff because we're making this course up as we went along.
We actually use...
The rubric's on there, but I only very slightly modified it from Chris, so I can easily send the syllabus for him.
Rubric on his philosophy blog.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So and I will change it slightly next year. It definitely needs a little bit more direction. Some of the students felt some more specific definition of what I thought was frequent enough. You know, they want real numbers. Yeah. So the only thing that we have a little bit of problem with at the moment on the technical side of it is that the first blog post I got them to do for functionality, currently this is his first one, it appears in here, and I don't want to have it as a marking thing. So we have yet to figure that out, but Chris seemed to be fiddling with it. It's tagged. Yeah, some sort of filter.
I don't know if you're familiar, if you ever looked at the rubric tool in Angel, but there is a rubric tool in Angel that could help you grade multiple.
Yeah, I had a brief look at it at the start, and I didn't actually revisit it as the semester went on and I got more experience, so I should probably look at that again.
We can actually, you can request a technology learning assistant
Uh-huh.
to come to your office, and they'll actually work with you on that tool.
I mean, yeah, it'd be really good to do it straight from the rubric, that's for sure, so that'd be great. Yeah.
Andrew, could you, I think you said it at the beginning, but what were the specific requirements for the blog contributions? Did you say weekly?
So what I gave them A's for was once a week on the entry and twice a week for comments. Quite a few of them, if you just did that and your entries and your comments weren't any good, you wouldn't get an A. So quite a few of them took the view that, we don't quite know what he wants, why don't I do twice as much, and that'll really help my chances of getting an A. And that was really good, especially on the comments. Some of them went ballistic on the comments. Incidentally, I should say too that you can organise by number of comments, so you can see which posts were the most popular. Well, you can when it does its thing, which I thought was actually kind of interesting to see where the students' brains were going. Anyway, the short answer was that the most popular one was one on the safety of organic facial cosmetics.
How often did the class go through?
It was a Tuesday, Thursday slot for an hour and a quarter. I also used the blog quite often as a way of breaking up the class too, because you can bounce off something that's just been posted and said, well, I actually think this and that. It's really good. It's a really good tool for classroom interactions.